Hello everybody and welcome back to another ship review episode, and today we are going to be looking at the German Tier 8 battleship, the Bismarck, sister ship to the Tirpitz, and of course this is the non-premium ship. What I'm going to do in this particular video is look over the stats import, talk about our upgrade modules, talk about our captain skills, and then show you the Bismarck in action in a battle. So let's get started. In terms of survivability, the Bismarck is pretty darn good. HP wise, she's got 69,200 hit points, which is the second highest in the game for Tier 8 battleships, behind the Tirpitz by only 100 hit points. The Amagi and the North Carolina both have less. Amagi is 66,300 and the North Carolina at 66,000. So Bismarck, good amount of HP. Armor-wise, Bismarck is also really good. In fact, one could say that the Bismarck's actual side armor is actually better than that of the Amagi and the North Carolina. And of course, because she's a German battleship, she's also got that turtleback, making her, in terms of protection, quite a bit better than the other two battleships. However, in a lot of battles, you might not be getting the same kind of feeling. I'll explain why in a second. So first, let's take a look at the Bismarck's armor. The bow armor, 32 millimeters, and of course there's even a piece there that's 60 millimeters thick. Stern armor is 32 millimeters, and so that is actually pretty standard, because if you compare it to something like the North Carolina, which is 32, Amagi, which is 32, Bismarck, when it's bow on, it's not going to get overmatched by 406 millimeter guns. So in terms of the bow and stern armors, it's just fine. Now, the side armor, which is actually where the belt is actually better than the other battleships. If you take a look at the Bismarck, she's got a piece of side armor here that's 320 millimeters thick, and then she's got an upper piece that's 160 millimeters thick. Compare that to an Amagi, which has an upper plate that's only 32 millimeters, and the main belt, which is 254. The North Carolina, where she's got a main belt that's like 305 millimeters thick, and then the upper belt, which is 32. The Bismarck, from the side when angled, is actually very good. Not only that, but she's also incredibly hard to citadel because, again, German battleship, she has that amazing turtleback, so most likely when you shoot at her, you're going to be getting penetration damage. However, I know right around now somebody's going to say, but how come when I see Bismarcks in battle, they seem to be so fragile, and anytime that North Carolina shoots at a Bismarck, the Bismarck takes a huge ton of penetration damage. Why is that happening? Well, mostly has to do with the way that a Bismarck gets played. See, a North Carolina, even though its side upper armor is only 32 millimeters thick, the thing about most North Carolinas you run into is they typically just happen to look at you like this all the time. So they're just, giving you this very angled profile, and a lot of times you're going to be bouncing a lot of shots, and your shells are not really going to be doing much in terms of penetration or citadels. They're just going to be bouncing. Maybe a lucky hit here at the flattest part will get a penetration, maybe even a lucky citadel. But North Carolinas, a lot of times you tend to see them in this particular profile, which makes them very hard to get good damage on. The Bismarck, because she only has 4 guns forward, she can't really always end up in this particular bow-on position because she just doesn't have enough forward firepower. So a lot of Bismarck players have to show this little bit on the side here to get all 8 guns into action, including the 2 rear turrets. And by turning out and trying to bring all the guns into action, you expose this particular piece of armor so that people can shoot into it and potentially go and get plenty of penetration hits. So you tend to see a lot more damage when taking that way. But if a Bismarck were to solely just present a bow-on profile all the time, and let's say they were running up against a North Carolina who's also going bow-in, what you most likely will end up seeing is just 2 ships ramming each other to death. So, and that's the thing about the way the battleships are. If they're bow-in to bow-in and they're both bouncing shots, the end result typically is always a ram. Anyways, okay, so Bismarck's armor is actually really good, but because of the way she has to be played, you tend to expose that still really good armor belt, but you tend to expose it at, of course, an angle where people can do penetrations, and that is the reason why you end up taking a lot more damage. But overall, still, just in terms of raw armor, and all that, she is still very good. Her armor is very nice. Torpedo protection, however, is a bit lacking, as with most other German battleships. She's only got 22%, but she does have hydroacoustic. So she has sonar, which can allow you to see torpedoes from further out. So that is very helpful. Now that we talked about guns while we're talking about armor, let's just move on to the artillery. And The Bismarck's artillery, the main ones at least, do kind of let her down. She's got 380mm guns, which when you compare it to the 410 on the Amagi and the 406mm guns on the North Carolina, these guns really do lack punch. I mean, the shell weights tend to be a lot lower. These shells just don't have all that much when you compare it to things on the North Carolina and the Amagi, which means that in a lot of cases when your shells hit, you're either going to see increased chances of bounces, or you're going to just see your shells not doing as well compared to the other two battleships. In terms of the stats though, the reload time is nice, 26 seconds. The 180-degree traverse speed for battleship guns at 36 seconds is pretty good. Dispersion's a bit wonky. The Bismarck is a lot like the Tirpitz in this way. At range, the shells tend to be sort of very erratic. Sometimes you get nice salvos, sometimes you don't at all. So dispersion is a bit wonky there. That's the reason why the Bismarck prefers to be a little bit closer, usually inside of 12 kilometers. So, between, let's say, 8 to 12 kilometers would be like the Bismarck's sort of comfort zone. In terms of the AP shell damage, 11,600. Again, if you compare it to the North Carolina shell damage, which is 13,100, and the Amagi shell damage, which is 12,600, the Bismarck's shell damage also tends to be a little bit on the low end. Again, much smaller shells. She does have good shell velocity, so that means that the arcs of the shells do tend to be a little bit on the flatter side. If you compare it to the North Carolina, whose shell velocity is 701 meters for the AP, or the Amagi, who's got 806, Bismarck just has these nicer arcs. Alright, so main battery firing range, 21.2 kilometers, is respectable, but you don't want to be using that max range. The Bismarck really isn't suited for sitting the back and sniping. So if the main guns aren't that great, where does the Bismarck shine? And it shines in its secondaries. The Bismarck secondaries have a 7-kilometer stock range without any improvements. That's already a lot of range for secondaries. And the second thing, of course, is they all fire HE. So they have a ton of secondaries on each side of the ship, and they tend to rain a lot of HE and set a lot of fires, which is really where a lot of damage can be gained, especially when you have the full secondary build. The Amagi, for example, also has a lot of secondary guns on the side. In fact, it's even got quite a bit more. If you look at the Amagi, she's got 8 guns of these 127mm variety, and she's got 8 more of these 140mm variety, giving her a total of 16. The Bismarck, in terms of secondaries, only has 14 per side. She's got 8 of these 105mm, and she's got 6 of these 150mm guns per side. So she's actually got less, but remember, the Bismarcks fire all HE, which is very, very nice. The Amagis, well, all the 140mm ones fire AP. So, in that sense, the Bismarck is superior. And of course, the extra range is very, very helpful. So the thing about the Bismarck is what you want to do when you want to think about building the ship is you want to focus on the secondaries. The main guns are really for just up close and brawling, where maybe dispersion doesn't mean all that much. The Bismarck's AA it's alright, I would say. I mean, she's got decent longer range AA with 105mm guns. They give 133 average DPS out to 4.5 kilometers. She's also got these 37mm AA guns that provide 103 damage out to 3.5. So the Bismarck's AA is alright. I mean, you're not really going to be focusing on these particular AA guns at all. They'll benefit a bit from advanced firing training, but I mean, if you compare the Bismarck to a North Carolina, the AA doesn't even come close, especially if the North Carolina focuses on an AA build, where you see the North Carolina's got 151 average damage out to 5 kilometers, and then of course 238 damage to 3.5. So Bismarck's AA it'll shoot down some planes, but it's nothing exactly to be writing home about. Maneuverability wise, the Bismarck is nice. Max speed 31 knots. She's a nice fast battleship, very, very zippy. Turning circle radius of 850 meters. I mean, you compare it to the North Carolina, it's not going to be as good, right? The North Carolina is at 760. But if you compare something to like an Amagi with 870, Bismarck at 850 looks pretty reasonable. Rotor shift time is 16 seconds, again, compared to the other battleships like the Amagi at 17.3 or the North Carolina at the exact same rotor shift. The Bismarck's rotor shift is actually pretty good. Compared to the Tirpitz, you'll notice that the two share pretty much identical maneuverability, the Bismarck being 0.5 knots faster. The Bismarck, in terms of speed and maneuverability, is pretty good. Concealment, 15.9 kilometers it's okay. I mean, you're not really ever going to run a stealth build on a Bismarck, so 15.9 is alright. I mean, North Carolinas will be able to get their concealment a bit better, just because a lot of NC players might run that stealth North Carolina build. So, it's alright, not amazing. I mean, the Amagi's easier to spot if it doesn't run concealment, so Bismarck concealment, I mean, it's a battleship. You're going to get spotted quite often. Alright, so moving on to modules and what do you recommend? Well, I mean, you want to go secondary, so definitely consider you might even want to consider getting auxiliary armaments mod 1, just for that extra survivability to your secondary guns. So I would say auxiliary armaments mod 1, then get the secondary battery mod 2, then of course go for Damacon. Then you want to probably get Damacon 2, just for increased abilities to survive fires and flooding. And then finally, I guess with the module you can get concealment, or you can actually get target acquisition systems mod 1, just in case you actually want to spot torpedoes out a little bit earlier, or let's say you're running into a smoke cloud and your hydro's down. You can proxy spot from an extra kilometer away, which is very, very helpful. You got a 3 kilometer proxy spot range instead of the 2 kilometers that you would normally get. So I would say on the Bismarck, I mean on the last slot, either one is okay. Concealment just to allow you to maybe get a bit closer before people see you, but target systems acquisition mod 1 makes perfect sense. In terms of the captain skills, on a Bismarck, I would say you want to opt for basic firing training on the first row. On the second row, you can opt for expert marksman. Again, just having your turrets traverse a little bit faster is good. On the third one, get superintendent. On the fourth row, I would say get advanced firing training. You want anything to boost up those secondaries. And of course, the extra boost to AA is helpful too. And then, of course, the god tier skill for Bismarcks is manual fire control for secondary armament. This will just allow your secondaries to hit that much more frequently. With the remaining 3 points you've got, you can probably go for basics of survivability. You might want to opt for something like vigilance, again, just to give yourself that extra warning against torpedoes. Or you can even go for high alert, just to decrease the time it'll take for your damage control party consumable to come back. In terms of consumables, the Bismarck as battleship has access to hydroacoustic, and it's the excellent German hydroacoustic. So your ship acquisition range with the hydro on, 5.58 kilometers, torpedo acquisition is 3.84. If you've got this popped, it'll give you plenty of warning against incoming torpedoes, and if you're chasing down destroyers who are in smoke, very, very helpful tool. Aside from that, that's pretty much it from the port view for the Bismarck. Let's take a look at the Bismarck in battle, and I'll share all the extra thoughts that I have about this particular ship. And the replay for the battle today comes in from Saving J, who is playing a Bismarck. And of course, divisioned up with Demonoid, the Demonoid in a Benson. In case that name sounds familiar, it's because a couple days ago I did, I believe, a Zal review, and Demonoid was the one who got featured there, playing a Zal. So, kind of an interesting coincidence. But anyways, moving on. One thing I did forget to mention, because I am a total derp sometimes and I forget things, is that if you are playing a Bismarck and you're playing the secondary build, don't forget to equip secondary flags. Just give your secondary guns every little bit of a boost that they can get. And it's helpful because the flag gives you extra bit of range. And the Bismarck, yeah, it does well with that extra bit of range because it allows you to play a little bit further back, but at the same time, getting the most out of both your primary and secondary guns. Alright, so in this particular battle, Saving J is also top tier. Now that is important to point out because Bismarcks do really, really good when they're top tier and they're facing tier 7 and tier 8 ships. They really do well. Their guns are punchy enough at this tier. Their secondary armament, and because they can kind of close the range, their secondary armament combined with that primary armament is enough to do quite a good amount of damage. Where the Bismarck really begins to struggle is, let's say it starts to face all tier 8s, tier 9s, tier 10s. That's where you start to see the struggle beginning. Your guns aren't punchy enough, right? So you're trying to maybe bring more your secondary guns into play. Maybe you're trying to show a little bit more of the side. And, against ships with 406 millimeter guns and beyond, they really can punish you. So Bismarck, I would say, is a very, very good ship when dealing with, let's say, tier 8 and below. Because even against tier 8s, I still think it's pretty competitive. But if he runs into tier 9, 10 stuff, it's going to suffer a little bit more, and the struggles are going to be a little bit more real there. All right, so early stages of the game, Demonoid, of course, has been helpful, laid down a smoke screen, and of course, when you're a battleship and there's no other destroyers near you to be of a threat, and you get a friendly destroyer that lays a smoke, get in there, right? Know how to use smoke as a battleship. That's really important. And there is kill number 1 on that Miyoko, which, again, when you're dealing with tier 7 cruisers, you're generally going to have a better time at it. Speaking of the Bismarck sort of ideal place, distance-wise from the enemy, some battleships, like let's say Amagi, you can be a little bit further back, and there's no harm really done by being a little bit further back. But the Bismarck's ideal range is a little bit closer. Ideally, I would say if you are between 8 kilometers to 12 kilometers from your target, that's where you want to be in a Bismarck. One, you had a range where your guns aren't massively affected by dispersion. You're still going to be able to land a good number of hits. And of course, your secondary guns tend to be either in action or very, very easily able to be brought into action because of sort of how close you are to their max range. Again, manual secondary skill is very important if you want to get a good number of secondary hits. And of course, secondary hits have also sort of the psychological effect. It's not just the fact that they do damage and they save fires, there's also this sort of psychological effect if you're on the receiving end. If you're getting hit by one salvo every 30 seconds from a battleship, you still sort of in your mind have this, oh, it's okay, I've got a little bit of time to react or to dodge or whatnot. When you're constantly being shelled by secondaries, there's a little bit of shell shock almost. It's like, oh, there's all this happening, I've got to do something to either dodge or react differently and things like that, and it makes it so that when you run into this kind of thing, it kind of forces you sometimes to play a little bit differently. Anyways, there we go. There's kill number 2, as that Kutuzov showed broadside and got punished. Again, as you can tell, the distance being this close, the sort of bad dispersion that you get on the Bismarck is not really that noticeable. All right, and of course you can tell none of the destroyers want to get close, right? Not too close. Important thing about the range thing as well is also do keep in mind that as a Bismarck, you don't want to get super surprised by a destroyer up close. Like, you're not a Tirpitz, you don't have that last ditch weapon that you could still kill a destroyer off if a destroyer pops up. With the Bismarck, if a destroyer pops up, aside from your main guns, you're pretty much dependent on your secondaries to do good. And if the destroyer has enough HP to tank your secondaries to get that torpedo salvo off, you might very easily die. So you have to be very careful about your positioning and also where enemy destroyers are. In this case, there was only one enemy destroyer, was a bit further away, so no threat. That's okay. Against, let's say at higher tiers, where maybe you're running into destroyers with longer range torpedoes and things like that, smart usage of the sonar becomes a must, which means you got to enable sort of like last position on the mini map. You got to keep track of where enemy destroyers are, and of course, when you know that you're under threat, make sure you use a Hydro. One other thing, and this is sort of more ranked versus randoms, is that I think the Bismarck, ideally, as a ship, is very well suited for randoms, right? Randoms tend to be a little bit more chaotic. There's a little bit more mistakes people would make. There's a lot easier to get into sort of brawling range without getting counterplayed. And I think in randoms, I think Bismarcks will do really well, just because that combination of secondaries and that good armor allows you to brawl efficiently. And at really, really close ranges, even your weaker guns in comparison to Amagi in North Carolina will still allow you to do some pretty darn good damage. But where I've noticed sort of, I guess, real problems for the Bismarck is during ranked and during competitive. Now, I'm not saying you can't do well later on when you're running into a lot more the more average show players, but in the early stages, especially when I was running into a lot of the very good players in ranked, a well-played North Carolina was, I think, a significantly more valuable asset in a competitive environment than a Bismarck. The Bismarck just had not enough of that forward firepower, had to show more of the side, and by showing more of the side, it just got punished more. And the North Carolina could just face tank all day long. Of course, in competitive environments, if you had CVs, then the AA starts to make a big difference. So do keep that in mind as well when we're talking about the differences between the Tier 8 battleships. Amagi's biggest problem, actually, is the fact that Amagi has, yes, it's got the great firepower, but it's got some of the same problems that the Bismarck does. It has to show more of the side in order to get all of its guns to bear, and then, its armor isn't as good. So its secondary is not as good. So Amagi, sort of on a competitive ranked environment, was more like third place in terms of how good the ships were. NC and Bismarck being more 1-2. And while I was yakking off about ranked and competitive, Saving Jay scores another kill by nuking a Bationi and sending him to Davy Jones's locker. Alright, so now, Amagi versus Bismarck, right? Here's the fight. In this kind of fight, in my personal opinion, Amagi's at a disadvantage, especially at this kind of range. At longer range, if the Amagi can maintain that longer range, would have been okay. But at this close range, the Amagi is going to suffer because look at the secondaries go, right? So now the Amagi has to decide to either switch between HE or AP in order to shoot at an angled Bismarck, deciding whether he wants fires or potentially the Bismarck giving more of a broadside to shoot at and maybe get a good penetrating salvo. But the Bismarck can really just keep shooting AP without really having to switch to HE because the secondaries will continue to light fires and do damage that way. Now, generally speaking, the Bismarck as a battleship is ideally suited to playing with other ships. And its best sort of performing attribute might be its ability to push. Because, again, you have that sonar, so you can at least pick up ships in smoke, or you've got the ability to spot torpedoes a little bit earlier. It's like, those are all really good things for pushing, right? Because the things to stop pushes with include things like fires or torpedoes. And if you can spot those earlier, or if you can push into smoke clouds reliably and have your secondaries rain on stuff, and of course having the great armor so you don't really get citadel, does make for a very good pushing ship. But Bismarck should not be pushing alone. That's the mistake I also see a lot of Bismarck players making. It's like, oh, like, I'm in a pushing ship with great armor, I'm just gonna push by myself. Like, no, don't push by yourself. The Bismarck is good pushing when it's got support. Now, in this particular case, Saving Jay is by himself, and in this particular instance, he was okay, namely because he wasn't facing the entire enemy team by himself. He was engaged in a bit of a 1 versus 1. So it's okay, but normally if you run into, let's say, an enemy fleet where it's multiple people shooting at you, Bismarck can still get melted. Not that difficult. So, you know, ideally you want to be with other ships on your team. Destroyers, maybe even other Bismarcks. 2 Bismarcks or 3 Bismarcks in division can be a pretty scary thing, right? Because they just got that amazing amount of secondary guns, and it's like, things get up to you with that much HE coming from secondaries, you're just gonna get set on fire constantly. Like, I remember if I was playing at North Carolina, for example, and I was trying to bow tank, if I ran into 2 Bismarcks who got within range with their secondary guns, I mean, I was expecting to be on fire quite a lot. And it's a pain in the butt. So anyways, Saving Jay takes out the Amagi and has actually moved himself into cover, mostly because his HP isn't all that great and he didn't want to fight a full HP Kanai, because that's not much fun. Instead, comes around and trying to catch the 2 other enemy battleships north. Hopefully, though, they're still going to be showing a broadside because, hey, even the Bismarck with its 380mm guns, not all that great, but hey, broadside, it'll still do damage, right? Unfortunately for Saving Jay, the Fuso, well, it turned away just a little bit, as you can tell on the mini-map in relation to Saving Jay's Bismarck. That Fuso is a little bit angled, so of course this salvo, it's actually not a bad salvo, but you'll see. There you go. I mean, just didn't get all that much there. Even though, according to the ribbons, 5 penetrations, but probably penetrated like a secondary gun or something else, 7,000 damage wasn't all that good. But then the Fuso decides, oh, hey, I got hit by something, I'm now going to go broadside. And the second salvo, that's going to hurt. Again, remember, Bismarck has a 4-second reload advantage compared to other tier 8 battleships, which means you're going to be able to get off those salvos that much faster. There you go. Citadel, couple penetrations, and that's kill number 5, and Saving Jay's got his Kraken. 187,000 damage, right? I did say that if you're dealing with tier 6, 7, and I guess some tier 8s, you know, as the Bismarck, you should be fine. Alright, so shells out against this Kanai, who is, I don't even know what he's doing, just broadside going backwards, and feeds Saving Jay kill number 6. Yeah. Alright, enemy has 1 remaining destroyer and 1 remaining Kanai now. Gneisenau now on their team does manage to finish off a Colorado, but what is that Gneisenau now going to do? He's up against an basically entire enemy team still. He's going to die. And of course the destroyer, fine against things, but if you get spotted, if you're a destroyer and get spotted by a Bismarck, it's really, really tough. I mean, just so many shells coming at you. Evading and dodging become quite a bit harder when you're not really sure what's the next group of shells that are going to start falling down on you. And that's the strength, right, of these secondary guns. You're going to have shells that just rain down on a destroyer. And a destroyer that's usually trying to maybe dodge your primary guns will also have to dodge so many more things, making dodging that much harder. Ganai, by the way, armor is pretty good. I did say that earlier. You know, if you hit at an angle, you're going to see chances of shells either bouncing or not penetrating. Ganai, on the other hand, just full-on potato, showing that broadside, eating another big salvo there. And secondary guns just doing what secondary guns do best on a Bismarck. Just rain, 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 HE everywhere. There's fire. The hits do damage too, don't forget that. I mean, just the hits, even though they don't show up as a damage numbers, they are still doing damage. Then combine that with fires, it's brutal. Ganai has just so many fires, just completely getting barbecued. See, the Ganai's best bet in that particular circumstance would have just been to turn in and rush. Just get in there, rush, and angle, and go for torpedoes. Like, don't do what that Ganai did, which is stay at that intermediate, like, 7-ish, 8-ish kilometer range, and get pounded into submission by the HE. Don't do that. That is how you get yourself killed. There's Benson as well. You could have stayed invisible. There was nothing there that required you to show yourself. I mean, that Benson also potatoed. Just popped up, showed himself, and then can't really effectively run away. You're either going to get caught by the main guns, or you're going to get caught by the secondary guns, or you're going to get caught by a combination of both. In this case, dodging the main guns, good, but look at the secondaries. Right? They're going to force this Benson to have to turn in a different direction and try to continue dodging shots, and that's just not much fun. Of course, another salvo from the main guns, and it's all over for the Benson. So, not a bad battle, actually, for Saving J, mind you. But again, do keep in mind, it is when you are top tier. Bismarcks are really strong when they're top tier. Be careful of the tier 10s. Really be cautious of tier 10s. They will hurt you, especially because, like I mentioned earlier, the Bismarck's playstyles, you sometimes do really have to show a little bit more of that side. And the final results screen, 293,442 credits. This is on a free account, so it's not a premium account, right? So that's actually a pretty good credit gain for a free account. 7,342 experience, that's pretty good. Free experience, 368. Confederate, Dreadnought, Kraken, High Caliber, 222,000 damage. Well, let's see here. 12 planes shot down even. So you see the AA was doing something, at least for a little bit. 8 ships destroyed, 11 fire set, 5 citadel hits, 189 secondary hits. So the secondary guns really are going to do some work. And take a look at the damage here. You'll see about main guns, 156,000 damage, and then you see secondary and HE. That combined together is in excess of 60,000 damage there. Almost 65,000 damage from secondary and fires alone. So that's quite a big chunk of damage, you know, that you're just getting from weapons that are fully automated, essentially. All you have to do is control and click. So, you know, secondary build on a Bismarck is probably the way to go, and don't forget that when you're doing that, you want to keep within certain range. And the final credits and experience screen. Now, we're going to look over on the premium side, because we kind of know how he did without a premium account. Had he had a premium account, would have earned 344,000 credits after all the deductions. Base experience would have been over 3,000. Total experience earned would have been 11,000. Oh, that's good experience gain. Yeah, so no, really, really good battle in a Bismarck. But do keep in mind that he was top tier. Anyways, folks, that does it for this Bismarck review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, do leave those in the comment section below. One other thing before I sign off for the day, for all of you at the World of Warships and Global Fanbase group on Facebook, hello, giving you guys a shout out, because yesterday when I joined your group, there's a couple of people immediately who was like, oh, hey, how you doing? Then there's a couple of people like, are you real? You're not real. You can't be joining our group. All right, so there it goes. Shout out for you guys, and it was good meeting all of you. You guys are a fun group, and I look forward to hanging out with you a bit more. And that does it for me. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it's been helpful. Take care, have a great one, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.